Welcome to the online training course, CHEMPACK Module 3, Logistics and Maintenance of the CHEMPACK Containers. The purpose of this course is to provide training in maintaining a CHEMPACK container. Your work here today helps to ensure an effective and coordinated response to a potential emergency requiring the deployment of CHEMPACK assets in Connecticut. Module 3 covers the logistics and maintenance of a CHEMPACK. This module is targeted towards CHEMPACK Host Facilities Personnel at the Connecticut Department of Public Health, hospitals, or fire departments, and other staff and volunteers who may be involved in a response effort. Following this course, you will be able to identify a CHEMPACK host facility's role and responsibilities, describe how CHEMPACK assets are maintained, and summarize when and how CHEMPACK assets should be mobilized. This course is organized into 4 parts. We'll start with discussing the host facility's responsibilities. In Part B, we'll discuss how CHEMPACK assets are maintained. Part C will explain how CHEMPACK assets are mobilized. Part D will discuss the after-action documentation required after an event. A final summary will provide a quick review of the key concepts covered in the course. First, a quick review from Module 1. The CHEMPACK program was developed by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, as part of its Strategic National Stockpile. The rationale behind the CHEMPACK program is that pre-positioning nerve agent antidote caches across the U.S. will serve to increase state and local capacity, and thereby equip responders to rapidly treat large numbers of persons exposed during a nerve agent incident. Connecticut presently has 25 CHEMPACKs, strategically positioned at host facilities across the state. These facilities serve as the host agencies for CHEMPACKs here in the state. These locations were chosen to ensure that antidotes could quickly be deployed to any municipality within minutes of a suspected nerve agent incident being reported. Host agency or host facility are terms that the CDC uses to describe the hospital or emergency medical services location to which a CHEMPACK container has been assigned. In Connecticut, fire departments, the Department of Public Health, and hospitals serve as host facilities. The locations were chosen to ensure that antidotes could be quickly deployed to any municipality within a short period of time after a suspected nerve agent incident is reported. Information regarding the precise locations of the CHEMPACKs is not available to the general public. Prior to installing the CHEMPACK container or containers hosted at a facility, that facility will have entered into an agreement with both CDC and Connecticut Department of Public Health prior to installing the CHEMPACK containers. This agreement outlines the storage requirements for the containers and also provides guidance as to when the containers should be opened. We will go over these requirements and guidance throughout the rest of this section. Each facility that hosts a CHEMPACK container must comply with specific security and storage requirements. CHEMPACKs are equipped with special telephones called Sensaphones that automatically send a message to the CDC if the container is opened, if the proper temperature is not maintained, or if security is breached in any way. Personnel at host facilities are in close contact with both the Connecticut Department of Public Health and the CDC to implement the CHEMPACK program within their facility. In order to host a CHEMPACK container, a facility must provide a storage location of adequate size that meets specifications set forth by the CDC regarding temperature, ventilation, lighting, humidity, and sanitation. Maintaining these storage conditions is particularly important. CHEMPACK assets are part of the Food and Drug Administration's Shelf Life Extension Program, or SLEP. We will discuss the Shelf Life Extension Program in greater detail momentarily. Finally, host facilities must be able to ensure the security of CHEMPACK assets. We will discuss CHEMPACK security measures later in this section as well. But first, let's take a few minutes to get a better idea of exactly how the CHEMPACK containers are configured. Recall from Module 1 that there are 2 different configurations of CHEMPACK containers: hospital-configured containers and EMS-configured containers. In Connecticut, Fire departments, the Department of Public Health, and hospitals serve as host facilities. Both configurations include antidotes for use by field responders and hospitals, just in different quantities. The EMS containers are configured to include more of the supplies that would be needed by emergency medical services for field response to a nerve agent incident, namely pre-filled auto-injectors that are easier to use in the field. The hospital containers are configured to include more of the multi-use vials for precision dosing and long-term care. Atropine sulfate, pralidoxime, and diazepam, the 3 nerve agent antidotes included in the CHEMPACK, are packaged in smaller boxes so that they can be quickly and easily be transferred to other hospitals or to the scene of a nerve agent incident. The EMS configured CHEMPACK containers include enough antidotes for 454 exposed individuals. Severe exposure would require 3 auto-injectors, where minor exposure may only require 1. This slide lists the contents of these containers. An important distinction to note is that in the EMS configured container, 80% of the supplies are auto-injectors, which are appropriate for field use. The contents of the container are color-coded red for the field and blue for non-host hospitals. The hospital-configured CHEMPACK containers include enough antidotes for 1,000 severely exposed individuals. Severe exposure would require 3 auto-injectors, where minor exposure may only require 1. This slide lists the contents of these containers. An important distinction to note is that in the hospital-configured container, 80% of the supplies are multi-dose vials, which are appropriate for hospital use. The contents of the container are color-coded red for the field and blue for non-host hospitals. When treating victims of a suspected nerve agent incident, hospitals will require several additional supplies not included in the CHEMPACK containers. These are referred to as ancillary supplies, and recommended amounts of supplies are listed on this slide. Both host hospitals and non-host hospitals must have access to the quantities of ancillary supplies listed in the right-hand column. This is an example of a CHEMPACK container. As you can see, they are constructed of wire Lexan mesh. CHEMPACK containers are 60.5 inches long, 32.5 inches wide, and 60.5 inches high, and weigh 500 to 800 pounds when filled with pharmaceuticals. The CHEMPACK containers are approved by the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, for storage of Schedule IV controlled substances when external security enhancements are in place. CHEMPACK assets can only be stored inside of CHEMPACK containers. Conversely, no other supplies can be stored in the CHEMPACK containers. Each CHEMPACK container is equipped with a built-in Sensaphone. The Sensaphone connects the container to an analog telephone line and automatically sends a message to the CDC in the event that the container is disconnected from the telephone line or power source, the ambient temperature goes outside of the acceptable range, CHEMPACK Security is breached, or the CHEMPACK container is opened. Use of the Sensaphone requires a separate operational analog telephone line. In the event of a Sensaphone call, the CDC will contact the host facility directly to follow up, and also notify the Connecticut Department of Public Health Strategic National Stockpile Coordinator. Connecticut Department of Public Health will then follow up within 48 hours of the Sensaphone call by calling the host facility for a report on the container's inventory status. Environmental and security conditions that do not comply must be corrected in a timely manner, usually within 1 hour. If for some reason conditions cannot be corrected within 12 hours, then the CDC will coordinate with the Connecticut Department of Public Health Strategic National Stockpile Coordinator to move the CHEMPACK container or containers to an acceptable location to safeguard the quality and security of the material. Each CHEMPACK requires a designated storage area of approximately 50 square feet in size. The storage location must be in a climate-controlled environment with the temperature maintained between 59 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity below 60%. Additionally, the CHEMPACK storage location must have adequate lighting, ventilation, fire suppression, and protection from water damage, an uninterrupted power supply, as well as a plain old telephone system. Electricity is necessary to power the Sensaphone, which monitors ambient temperature, provides a security feature for the container, and allows direct communication with the CDC. If power is interrupted, the security of the container and the viability of its contents may become compromised. Each container must be connected to the host facility's emergency power grid. This way, in the event the facility loses power, electricity to the CHEMPACK container would be immediately restored when the host facility's emergency power source is activated. Alternatively, a CHEMPACK container could be in line with an uninterrupted power source, or UPS. This would also ensure that the power to the container is maintained should the host hospital experience a power failure. To ensure security, CHEMPACK containers must be stored in a locked room or metal cage. Only authorized personnel can access the CHEMPACK, and the host facility must maintain a list of authorized personnel and their contact information so they can be reached on a 24-hour basis. Furthermore, the CHEMPACK security must be physically monitored on a 24-hour basis by security personnel, motion detector device, camera, and/or door contact switch to alert security personnel of possible intrusions into the storage area. The CHEMPACK container itself is issued a unique serial numbered seal from the CDC, padlocked and monitored by the built-in Sensaphone. The Department of Defense Food and Drug Administration Shelf Life Extension Program, or SLEP, is to defer drug replacement costs for date-sensitive stockpiles of medical material by extending their useful life beyond the manufacturer's original expiration date. The SLEP program started in 1986 and is currently managed by Defense Medical Materiel Program Office at Fort Detrick, Maryland. All material testing for extensions are done at FDA test facilities. The FDA determines appropriate tests and methods, tests product samples, analyzes results for determining expiration extension, and performs research to address SLEP issues. The program is limited to the Department of Defense and selected federal agencies. For the CHEMPACK program, the SLEP is required to provide evidence that the required environmental conditions, as previously described, have been maintained. The CDC makes annual visits to all CHEMPACK host facilities in order to conduct periodic checks of the container contents to ensure that the CHEMPACK containers and storage locations are being appropriately maintained. During these visits, the CDC also refreshes the container contents. Some items, such as vials of water for injection, are not part of the SLEP and need to be rotated out of the container as their expiration dates approach in order to be replaced with fresh supplies. While the SLEP defines extended expiration dates for certain pharmaceuticals maintained under specific storage conditions, the expiration dates printed on the pharmaceuticals by the manufacturer do not reflect this. Therefore, during their annual visits, the CDC removes and replaces pharmaceuticals in the container which are nearing their printed expiration dates. These pharmaceuticals are then returned to CDC, tested for viability, and relabeled with the extended expiration date. This relabeling is important so that hospital and field responders can be assured that the antidotes are effective. This relabeling is also important to comply with federal and state law, which requires that the actual expiration date appear on the pharmaceuticals. Once relabeled, the antidotes are repackaged and restocked in a different CHEMPACK container, so the antidotes are actually rotated from one container to another, and even from state to state. The quality control and assurance which enables this shelf life extension is provided by the FDA. The FDA maintains samples from each lot of pharmaceuticals included in the SLEP, which they periodically evaluate. So long as the concentration of ingredients is in an acceptable range, the FDA will extend the shelf life of the entire lot by 2 years, provided there is evidence that the pharmaceuticals have been maintained at 59 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Data obtained from the Sensaphone in each container provides the necessary environmental history to the FDA to allow shelf life extension. Host facilities are responsible for conducting monthly inspections of the CHEMPACK containers, using a checklist provided by the Connecticut Department of Public Health. There are 10 steps to the monthly inspection, namely, host facilities must ensure that 1. The storage area is clean. 2. All lights are functional. 3. Ventilation is adequate. 4. There is no evidence of vermin. 5. The fire suppression system is functional. 6. The seal of the container is intact. Continued from the previous slide, host facilities must ensure that 7. The container padlock is secure. 8. The key to the container is in its place and secure. 9. The pouches containing CHEMPACK inventory and transfer of custody forms are attached and in plain sight. 10. And lastly, the Connecticut Department of Public Health contact information is visible. We've reviewed the host agency's roles and responsibilities in maintaining CHEMPACK assets. Now, let's talk specifically about when and how CHEMPACK assets should be mobilized. So, we know that CHEMPACK assets are available for use in the event of a suspected accidental or intentional nerve agent release. But what are the specific circumstances under which CHEMPACK assets should be mobilized? Well, you may recall from Module 1 that the CDC recommends that CHEMPACK assets be deployed in the event of a nerve agent release that will potentially overwhelm the local EMS and hospital supplies of nerve agent antidotes, put multiple lives at risk, and threaten the medical security and public health of the community. In the event of a nerve agent incident, responders should assess early on whether CHEMPACK assets may be needed. It is expected that hospitals and field responders will use their existing supplies of nerve agent antidotes before opening a CHEMPACK container. However, if responders anticipate that the incident is big enough to potentially deplete their local supplies, they should not hesitate to request or open a CHEMPACK. Unlike biological agents that may not produce ill effects for hours or days, nerve agents, organophosphates effects can manifest within minutes. The ability of first responders and emergency medical personnel to begin immediate treatment of individuals exposed will directly affect a casualty's ability to survive the exposure. You'll also recall that a nerve agent release may result from the intentional release of a chemical weapon, or, more likely, from an agricultural accident or the mishandling of organophosphate pesticides. Either way, the ability to respond rapidly with antidotes for these nerve agents is essential to reduce deaths and injuries. From the perspective of the host facility, there are 6 important steps to mobilizing CHEMPACK assets. Please note that these steps are occurring as part of a larger community response detailed in Module 2. Once a potential nerve agent incident is recognized, one or more nearby host facilities may be contacted by CMED with a request to mobilize CHEMPACK assets. Trained host facility personnel will open the CHEMPACK container and prepare the necessary materials for transfer, documenting this process using CHEMPACK chain of custody forms. CMED will arrange for the CHEMPACK assets to be picked up at the host facility by an emergency vehicle and transported to the incident scene, as well as to nearby non-host hospitals that do not have their own CHEMPACKs. The host facility will notify the Connecticut Department of Public Health Strategic National Stockpile Coordinator when a CHEMPACK container is opened. However, notification of Connecticut Department of Public Health personnel will not delay the mobilization of CHEMPACK assets, as this could delay the timely deployment of antidotes. Authorization from Connecticut Department of Public Health is not required to open the CHEMPACK containers. Now we'll explore these steps in a bit more detail on the following slides. Recall from Modules 1 and 2 that, in the event of a potential nerve agent incident, field responders will notify PSAP or CMED, who in turn will notify the host facility or facilities nearest to the incident to mobilize CHEMPACK assets. We want to reiterate that CHEMPACK assets should only be mobilized when a suspected nerve agent release has threatened the public health and/or security of the community. The CHEMPACK project will remain economically feasible only if material is used prudently and maintained under conditions that allow the CDC to extend its shelf life. Once a CHEMPACK container is opened, it is removed from the SLEP. Therefore, host facilities should use CHEMPACK assets only in the event of an incident that threatens to overwhelm otherwise available resources. In the event of a nerve agent incident, responders should assess early on whether CHEMPACK assets may be needed. If responders anticipate that the incident is big enough to potentially deplete their exhausting local supplies, host facilities should not hesitate to open their CHEMPACK containers. Once you verify that it is indeed necessary and appropriate to mobilize CHEMPACK assets, open the CHEMPACK container by following these steps. First, unlock the padlock. For security, all CHEMPACK containers should be locked at all times. The host facility's designated personnel will have access to the key. Once the container is unlocked, break the plastic seal across the container door and slide open the deadbolts on either side of the container. Use the canvas strap to pull the front door panel upwards towards the top of the container. Finally, pull the door panel out from the bottom of the container and remove the panel completely to access antidotes. Now it's time to ready the materials for distribution. First, remove all material from the CHEMPACK container and sort them by their label color, either red or blue. Boxes with red labels will be transported to the incident staging location. Boxes with blue labels will be transported to non-host hospitals closest to the incident. While sorting the boxes, be sure to complete 2 CHEMPACK chain of custody forms. The first form is to account for the red labeled boxes going to the scene of the incident, and the second form is for the blue labeled boxes going to the hospital's emergency departments closest to the incident. Ensure you place a check mark in the appropriate block. Copies of the CHEMPACK chain of custody forms are stored in plastic pouches attached to the outside of the CHEMPACK containers. These forms are used to track the transfer of the controlled substances from one location to another. They are designed to be completed rapidly so as not to slow the response of the CHEMPACK assets. Complete the appropriate forms prior to transferring CHEMPACK assets outside of your facility, and fax completed forms to the Department of Public Health, keeping copies for host facility records. CHEMPACK assets will be transferred from the host facility to the scene of the incident and to nearby hospitals by emergency vehicle. As described in Module 2, this will be coordinated by CMED.
Once removed and deployed, unused CHEMPACK material will not be put back in the CHEMPACK container. Once incident response is complete, all unused material from the CHEMPACK should remain where it is, either in possession of the host facility, the non-host hospital, or the first responder agency. The remaining material will be inventoried and deducted from the inventory initially delivered in the CHEMPACK to determine how much was used during incident response. Tracking of diazepam is particularly important as this is a Schedule IV drug, and most hospital pharmacies maintain only a limited supply in their regular inventory. This information will be sent to the Connecticut Department of Public Health Strategic National Stockpile Coordinator within 4 days following the conclusion of the event. The host facility, non-host hospital, or EMS agencies should retain the material in the interim and wait for further instruction from the Connecticut Department of Public Health. The Connecticut Department of Public Health will work with the CDC to replace CHEMPACK material used during a nerve agent event. Replacement of material lost due to natural disasters or compromise of environmental conditions will be negotiated between the state and the CDC. In the event of a non-emergency use or compromise of CHEMPACK, the Connecticut Department of Public Health Strategic National Stockpile Coordinator must report the loss as soon as possible following the discovery. Within 48 hours, they must submit a report documenting circumstances under which the inventory was lost.
The CDC must be notified within 24 hours of an emergency deployment. The deployment report should identify the amount of material expended, as well as the amount of material remaining. Remaining material will not be returned to the container and will be incorporated in local supplies. All host facilities will develop a deployment plan detailing the specifics of how the steps described in the previous slides would be carried out in your institution. This plan should address conditions of deployment, administrative authority, request for access guidelines, maintenance guidelines, a personnel list with CHEMPACK clearance, and the best manner and means to deliver the CHEMPACK assets to the scene or other secured location within the host facility. Personnel involved in CHEMPACK oversight and deployment should specifically identify the place where CHEMPACK assets will be picked up by the emergency vehicle and engage in internal drills transporting dummy boxes from the CHEMPACK container location to this offload point in order to anticipate any potential challenges with the different stages of mobilization. The location of the offload point should be shared with CMED and local EMS. Host facilities should engage in regular drills with these partners to ensure that any potential challenges related to mobilization and transfer of custody of CHEMPACK assets are identified and addressed in advance of an actual event. You have completed Module 3 of the Connecticut CHEMPACK training program. You now should be able to answer the following questions. What does it mean to be a CHEMPACK host facility? We discussed how the CHEMPACK host facilities have been identified in Connecticut and what it potentially means to you if your facility has a CHEMPACK. What are the host facilities' responsibilities during a nerve agent event? We detailed the overall system response procedures that would be observed in the event of a nerve agent incident and described in further detail the specific roles and responsibilities of host facilities and their personnel in this response. How are CHEMPACK assets maintained? We reviewed the special guidelines for storing and protecting CHEMPACK assets. When and how should CHEMPACK assets be mobilized? We reviewed the circumstances when CHEMPACK assets may be needed and described how to open the containers and distribute nerve agent antidotes to field and hospital-based responders.